Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John, and today I'm going to interrupt our regularly scheduled programming because WOTC threw us a curveball. And Gavin announced on the Magic Mothership on February 11th, 2025, their beta of their bracket system. You may remember that back in October of 2024, before Las Vegas, there was an announcement after WOTC took over the Commander Rules Committee, and they were going to introduce a new way to categorize and, I guess, divvy up the different types of power levels and different types of decks in Commander. And that initial suggestion from WOTC kind of was met with a lot of skepticism. They kind of posted some signed postcards and talked about putting decks in different buckets or categories, and nothing ever really came of it. Until now. So I'm recording this on the night of February 12th, the day after the announcement was made. I slept on it. I wanted a chance to think about it a little bit before I tried to put my thoughts into words. I shared some of my reaction earlier this morning with the folks on the CCO Discord, which you can join by becoming part of the Commander Cookout Patreon. I'm going to dispense with a lot of the usual stuff that I talk about with the podcasting business, but once again, we are part of Commander Cookout Media Group, which is sponsored by FusionGamingOnline.com, your source for all your gaming needs. All the usual links and promo codes will be in the description. But I want to get right to it because I just want to get my thoughts down. And I apologize, no camera for this episode. This is just going to be audio while I go over some of these points. I just wanted to get my thoughts out there, and I would not have a lot of time left for editing, so I wanted to keep it simple. Breaking it down, there are 5 brackets, and to simplify, think of them as being on a spectrum from precons to cEDH. Bracket 2, on one end, is where precons live, while bracket 5 is cEDH. Basically, you are going to be in orbit around either precons or cEDH as your touchstone, and that's pretty useful. Sub-precons is bracket 1 exhibition. These are basically your theme decks where showing off your creation is more important than winning or gameplay. Precons themselves sit in bracket number 2, and upgraded is bracket 3, stronger than precons. Bracket 4 is optimized, unrestricted decks where you're going to use some game changers, which we'll talk about in a moment. And I do like how this bracket system distinguished cEDH in bracket 5, which acknowledges that these decks are looking to compete in a specific metagame, where bracket 4 makes no such considerations. cEDH also specifically does away with pet cards, which may still be lingering in bracket 4. So boiling the scale of 1 to 10 down to 5 brackets, I'm not sure if it changes a lot, but it does do away with a lot of unnecessary granularity. The other part of the announcement is the Game Changers list, and I'm going to do WOTC a favor and simplify things just a little bit. The Game Changers are a list of 40 cards that WOTC has flagged in a way similar to Sheldon's old Naughty list or the Watch list, which they don't think are appropriate for precon level play. So these cards aren't necessarily banned, but they're not meant to be included in bracket 1 and 2 decks. And bracket 3 decks can play with up to 3 of them. So by having a limited amount, they should have a limited impact on those games, and they can still be used. Whereas brackets 4 and 5 are free to play with as many of them as they want. I'm going to loop this in with the broader categories of cards that WOTC calls out in their individual brackets, which are, in my mind, virtual game changers, which are extra turn spells, mass land denial spells, and 2-card infinite combos. They're not really on the list, but they're virtually on the list. The game changers warp games of Commander around them, and the brackets are intended to limit how many of these game changers can be included, each bracket letting players off the leash a little bit more. In bracket 1, nothing on the game changers list, so none of those cards, no extra turn spells, no mass land denial, and no 2-card combos. Bracket 2 is similar, no game changers, but no chaining extra turn spells, so one-offs are okay, no mass land denial, and no 2-card combos. Bracket 3, up to 3 game changers, no chaining extra turn spells again, no mass land denial, and no early 2-card combos. What is an early 2-card combo? We don't know. WOTC doesn't really give us any guidance on that. And in brackets 4 and 5, just use any cards, combos you want. Everything's fair game. So my thoughts on this. Brackets are better than a scale of 1 to 10. I don't think the granularity of 1 to 10 was ever super useful. everything was just a 7 anyway. I think these are much better than the original signposts that were suggested back in October, and I do think that anchoring the format with precons at one end of the spectrum and cEDH on the other, those are pretty good markers to compare to. And while I don't think it's super necessary, having that bracket 1 there for theme decks is nice to include. It probably would make more sense for it to be a 1 to 4 scale with those theme decks being at like bracket 0 or something, but I think the visuals of it being bracket 1 just make more sense. I'm happy that tutors are not included on a broad category of cards that are discouraged. They're actually encouraged in limited degrees in every single bracket. Removing the stigma of playing tutors is probably better for the health of the format overall. But I'm a little baffled by some of the choices on the Game Changers list. Like, most of the strongest tutors are also Game Changers, so it feels like Opposition Agent is kind of inconsequential to include in brackets 1 and 2, but they don't even have something like Grave Pact on the Game Changers list? That is really weird. I know that the Game Changers list is in flux and it will always be changing, and that's fine. I'm not sure though if I like having another pseudo ban list to keep in mind, but I do have to admit I appreciate that Moxfield and Architect have stepped up and will make it a lot easier with when you're brewing your deck online to be able to keep track of these things for you. I still think overall this is a step backwards and a negative. I just don't want there to be these multiple ban lists to worry about. Like, there was always a soft social contract ban list, which this is just formalizing a little bit. It just muddies the waters that in a way that I don't like. I also don't really understand why WOTC didn't better explain what they meant by early or late. There's a brief mention about pre-con games going 9 or more turns, but I think talking about critical turns and when it's appropriate to tune your deck to be able to go for it in each bracket is a lot more useful than some of the information that's listed. Like, give us bracket 1 is for double-digit turns. Bracket 2 is going to be a critical turn of 8 to 9. Bracket 3 is a critical turn of 6 to 7. Bracket 4 is a critical turn of 4 to 5. And bracket 5, cEDH, is a critical turn of 2 to 3. That's actually useful to be able to tune your deck and know when it's appropriate to be comboing off and trying to win the game. Overall, I am not a fan of the bracket system. I think it is better than the initial offering they suggested in October. It's a definite step in the right direction, and there is hope for this to potentially be useful to Commander players. But in its current iteration, I don't think it's ready for prime time yet. I think that the Game Changers need to be revisited. I think those broad categories of mass land denial, extra turn spells, and 2-card combos can probably just be put in at the top of the Game Changers list, and just go ahead and say that bracket 1 can include a single Game Changer. I think that's fine. I do like that some of the stigma of playing powerful lands like fetch land, shocks, and duels is not something that is included as disqualifying from those lower brackets. I think that's healthy for players to be able to play with the lands they like. The article does point out that you really only need those lands when you're competing at the highest levels, like in cEDH, which was nice to see pointed out, but trying to remove some of the stigma of people playing expensive cards being equated to cEDH, that is a nice change to see, and I do applaud it. If you want to hear about some more of my thoughts, you can check out what I wrote on the Commander Cookout Discord as part of the Commander Cookout Patreon. You can always find us on YouTube, where we are part of Commander Cookout Media Group, and you can send us an email to gemstonemindpodcast@gmail.com. Finally, you can catch us on Blue Sky, where we are at Gemstone Mine MTG. Until next time, I'm John, and this is Gemstone Mine.